Hi, and welcome to MentorCore. If you're new here, we're a community focused on helping people in the security, risk, and compliance fields grow their careers and leadership skills through mentoring. You can find more information about MentorCore at mentorcore.biz. I'm Dan Ayala, along with Lisa Beth Lentini Walker. Now, on to this week's discussion.
Welcome to another episode of the MentorCore podcast. Today, I am thrilled to let you know that we have Jerry Shafran as our guest. He's a serial entrepreneur. He is the CEO and founder of YouCompli, and he's also a very proud dad to two amazing human beings. We're going to learn a lot more about Jerry today, but I'm not going to steal any of his thunder. Jerry, tell us a little bit about you and your origin story. How'd you get into this profession?
Well, before we do that, remember, I don't want to leave out my wife. I am proudest of both my children and my wife of 26 years. She would be very upset if she wasn't, and she wasn't, if I didn't put her in there as well. I got into this profession somewhat by accident. As you mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started an IT services business, and we were hired by a bank to help them comply with what was then called Gramm-Leach-Bliley, which is the first privacy and security reg, or the Financial Modernization Act of 1999. And I got involved helping a bank create an insurance company inside the bank. And that introduced me to the challenges people had with regulation. I had no idea at that point. I was fortunate enough to put together a great team, and we developed a product. It was a company called Compliance Assurance. It was in the financial, or what they now call the fintech space. That company we built, grew, and we sold, and great successful ending for all parties involved. Took a little time off, and then I decided I wasn't quite ready to retire, and I looked around and realized that healthcare providers had an even bigger problem with regulations and challenges with compliance than insurance firms. And so we decided to create that same team that we had. We decided to create YouCompli, which is the existing business today.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I know one of the things that we've been talking about in compliance circles and in security circles is about the stress and pressure that goes along with the overwhelming number of regulations that exist. Can you talk a little bit more about what you see for the future of compliance professionals and other professionals that have highly regulated environments where there are changes every day? What are you seeing in terms of how people are managing that?
Well, let's talk about the challenge of the compliance officer kind of at a higher level first, and then we'll get into that. You know, being a compliance officer is extraordinarily difficult. It is not an easy job, the job itself. And all the things associated with it. And on top of that, this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. The profession itself is relatively new. It is not a profession that's 50, 70, 100 years old. You know, there's not a lot of universities out there today that are teaching, a lot of concepts related to compliance. They're not turning out compliance officers. In addition, the ones that are out there, they focus more on, I guess, what I'll call the analytical aspects of compliance. And they don't spend a tremendous amount of time on the softer skills, and skills like leadership and rapport building and the creation of trust. And those are things that are important in every career. You know, it doesn't really matter the business that you're in. You have to be good at those things if you're going to be successful, and compliance is no different. You know, those compliance officers that are really successful are those that demonstrate both the analytical stuff, but they also have those more interpersonal type skills. So that's again, not really reg change oriented, not terribly, I'll get, in that, but it's really more at that higher level, learning that softer stuff. And I guess as I think about that and I think through that, and am I rambling here? Should I just
Oh, you're great.
Should I keep going?
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
All right, terrific. So as I think more about that, one of the things that we're talking about to compliance professionals is the concept of creating value. You, Lisa Beth, you alluded to this in the run up to our podcast. The compliance professionals today often do not feel valued. I actually have a story from my insurance days that I'll share. I met a compliance officer at a very, very large insurance company, and he and I got to know each other, and we were having a dinner, and he related a story that he went into, it was Monday morning, he went into the coffee room in his office to get a cup of coffee, and he's pouring coffee, and a second person joined. And that person was getting coffee, and then a third person joined, and the second person and the third person began to interact. They began to kind of, hey, how was your weekend? What's going on? How are you? Completely leaving him out of the conversation. And at the end of the day, this hurt this guy's feelings. He didn't feel like he was part of this, this team, this organization, and it really hurt his feelings. And I think that's a thing that compliance officers can really connect with. You talk to compliance officers, and they're always talking about how, or not always, but they're often talking about how they want to be perceived as more valuable and more part of the team. So that value creation is something we all want, and that's a hard thing to do in any organization. For a compliance officer, it's really hard to do, because if you think about it, what a compliance officer does, it's around the avoidance of an issue. At the core of what a compliance officer, or what you referred to earlier as a guardian. I love that. That's so great. Lisa Beth, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take that or steal it. I will give you some attribution for it. But one of the things that guardians do is everything is about avoidance. It's avoiding this problem, avoiding a fine. So it's very hard to metric that. It's very hard to measure it. And so if you're trying to create value for an organization, a hospital of size, even a smaller hospital, you need to have something that's measurable. That's not a simple thing if you're really focused on avoidance. You need something quantifiable. Here's something that shows impact. So when we talk about value creation, what we do is we really look at two concepts. We want something that's quantifiable. You have to be able to count it. And then whatever it is that you're fixing has to be a real pain point, has to create pain throughout that organization. Well, it just so happens regulatory changes, I know that was a long-winded way of getting to it. Regulatory changes is really great for that. It's really the perfect candidate. There are literally thousands of new regulations that are coming out and coming at these people all the time. There's the American Hospital Association did a study a few years ago, which said that the average hospital is spending $3.6 million annually on complying with regs. So that's a pain point. In addition to the financial cost, the cost associated with complying from a personal level is challenging. Think about someone who's went into healthcare to provide care. They didn't go into pharmacy or oncology or some care providing, nurturing thing so that they could read a reg. And so in terms of a pain point, it is a very serious pain point for every part of the organization. So regulations, there's a tsunami of them. There's thousands of them, and they hit every part of the organization, and they apply to people who are providing care, and they get distracted from the provision of that care to deal with a 200-page regulation written in triple-spaced legalese. Not a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to talk about it, and to talk about how we look at value and what is valued within an organization. Because I hear time and again, people in compliance, people in security who are saying, hey, you know what? If I do my job, everything goes perfectly and no one notices.
It's that avoidance concept. You're absolutely right. And that makes it challenging to try to present to a senior manager, a senior executive, here's the value that I brought to the organization. I've heard other stories. I'm kind of genericizing this story, where the only time I meet or see the CEO is when something goes wrong. And that person comes downstairs and comes into my office and says, "Why am I paying for all this?" And one thing went wrong. We've had 3,500 new regulations come out this year, and we got sideways with one of them from 4 years ago. I've done pretty well with 3,499 of them. I'll try to do better. So it's that's a real. It's a hard thing to do from a day-to-day perspective. So we think regulatory change management is a great vehicle for the compliance officer, frankly, regardless of the industry, to create, measure, and demonstrate that value. An example that comes to mind, there's a New York hospital. I won't say the name of it. I wasn't supposed to say New York, but it's a very large organization.
There are a few of them in New York. We're probably okay.
Yeah, I think I'm okay. There's a bunch in there, but this one, this hospital is highly rated, and the CEO came out with a mandate that in this rating system, and I won't mention the rating system because if I do, it'll really kind of allow someone to hone in on the exact hospital. But the CEO came out and said, at a high level, we want to be number one in this very widely recognized rating system. And they basically said that we want every single department has to engage in the process of improvement so that they could, try to become number one. And obviously, in my opinion, the compliance function, the compliance department, I thought they made a great choice. They chose regulatory change management as what they were going to do and work on and improve to try to get this move up significantly from where they were to number one. So they went out and did some research, and in the research they found significant challenges in regulatory change management. The organization didn't have a good way of knowing the regulations were even coming in. Regulations come into all different parts of the organization. In addition to regulations coming in all the time to different places, no one really knew what was being done. There was a presumption that things were happening and things were being done, but no one really knew. The compliance function would pick up the phone and call when a reg came out that was important or something that someone asked about, and they'd call that department head and say, "Hey, did we take care of this?" And the department, "Oh yeah, we're good." Click. So there was a real challenge there. And then the last big thing that the survey showed was a lack of standardization. They didn't have a standard practice across all these different hospitals. So the compliance officer made a decision that regulatory change management was what they were going to use as what they were going to try to work on to have a wide-ranging impact that would make a significant contribution to being number one. Went through the process, went through the practice, and what started to happen was she began to get exposure at much higher levels of the organization, because this was a high-profile project, and in going through this high-profile project, she began to look for ways to improve and ways that she can be better at storytelling. So because what she wanted to do is she wanted to have improvement at being able to connect with, create trust, and gently persuade other people about how to be more effective with regulatory change management. And we worked with her, our company worked with her to try to help her with that storytelling, and we mentored her through that process. And at the end of the day, it turned out to be a really successful thing for her. And the compliance team, the exposure at the senior level was really, really significant. from her perspective. Again, I'm just rambling on here. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. And you actually, so you've been talking about the focus upward. One of the things that is I think equally a challenge for people in the compliance and risk and security and privacy space is finding that a way to convey that value to the people who are affected by the regulations or the additional procedures and processes. You talked about docs, and Elizabeth and I both come from families of doctors, and the care, the focus is different. These things add overhead. You hear about the security world. You want me to do these two-factor authentication. It just makes it more difficult. So do you have any insights on how compliance and security leaders and others can convey that value proposition to the people who are directly affected by it in a similar way that you mentioned how they can convey that to to the executive levels, to the people who are seeing the business value to it?
So yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I'll take how you've conveyed the problem and I'll kind of synthesize it a little bit down.
Please.
The department believes the compliance function should help fix the challenge with regulation. The compliance function has a real problem because they don't understand what goes on at the department. So that communication gap creates a real, there's a real challenge there. The compliance function can't take a regulation that's, I pick on pharmacy a lot because there's a lot of regs in pharmacy. Mm-hmm. That's pharmacy based and understand pharmacological aspects of that area, pharmacy area. So they can't take that reg and translate it because they don't understand pharmacy. So there's this disconnect between the subject matter expert within pharmacy and the compliance function, because the pharmacy people feel like the compliance people, it's a regulation, aren't you handling it? Right. So what as a solution to that, there's a lot of different ways that you can solve it. Obviously, there's technologies available. This is not a commercial, ours is one of them, but I would say that the first thing is you want to, and this is kind of broadly, you'd want to find those areas of your organization that are highly regulated and begin to build trust and rapport with those people. Think about how you can drive value to them. One of the ways that you can do that is to give them an easy, simple way to keep track of regulations, okay, monitoring, whatever you want to call it. Give them some strategies for how to, if they're the ones that have to read the reg, give them some strategies for what to look for and how to read them. So, there are things that you can do to, first of all, figure out, does it apply to us? That's one of the first things you have to do is, does this reg apply to our organization? I don't want you wasting time on a lot of regs that don't apply. So first thing is, let's do that. So offer them some strategies on how to look for in the first couple of paragraphs information that says this applies to us or it doesn't. Mm-hmm. That would be something I would do. The other thing I would do is I would offer them, this is hard, but offer them some ideas on how to take a 200-page regulation and synthesize it down to something simple and easy. Now, I will tell you that just saying that, it sounds almost silly. How do you take three column, written by lawyers, no disrespect to lawyers, written by regulators, and take that and synthesize that down into 1 or 2 paragraphs? How do you do that? It's very, very hard to do. Very, very challenging. But given that, that's something that we do for our customers, but I'm not sure how you would train someone to do that who's in pharmacy. And then the last thing I guess I would say to them is, whatever it is they decide to adopt, make it methodical, that it can be done again and again and again, because you're going to get more regs, and keep track of it.
If it isn't documented, it didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to document it. You absolutely, if you can't prove that you complied with a reg, there are some that would argue, why'd you waste your time?
So one of the things I heard you talking about is mentoring and coaching. At MentorCore, we're very passionate about the importance of mentoring. We have mentoring moments
we like it
on
so
Mondays.
Much we named it after it.
That's right. That's right. It was that good. So I would love to hear your perspectives on mentoring and some of the things that you've learned along the way, either as a mentor or as the recipient of mentoring.
So mentoring that's a big question, a terrific question. Mentoring, or I often refer to it as engaged learning. And the reason I call it engaged learning is, even though there may be a mentor-mentee relationship, if it's done well, both sides gain and learn. There's so much capability to learn if you're a mentor or a mentee. I've been both, and I've been in business now for 41 years, and I've started and owned 5 different businesses. So I'm often today, just simply as a factor of my age and my experience, asked to be a mentor. In that it's the story I talked about earlier with that large New York hospital. The person the woman who was in charge of this project, she came to me and she asked me if I would help her with what I referred to earlier as storytelling. At the end of the day, I'm a salesman. My job is regardless of the organizations I've started, my job has been to find problems, present my solution, and try to gently persuade people that my solution will solve the problem. And I've been fortunate to have been able to do that in lots of different hospitals. But she came to me and she said, as a compliance professional, I don't have a lot of experience in the persuasion beyond, here's a regulation, here's something you need to do, something you have to do. Can you work with me and help me? And the way we did that, strangely enough, is we began to have her practice demonstrating our software. So what she did is she would go through and she would demonstrate, she listened to me demonstrate the software and how we demonstrated it when we tried to sell it. And then she took notes, recorded, practice. She began to practice and she recorded and we went through it. And when the process was done, she was able to take this, this product, which solved a huge problem for them. And as opposed to having the salesman promote it internally, she promoted it internally. So she was able, because of that, she was able to tie herself to this high exposure, important project that was being looked at the C-suite level. She did it in such a way where she was building trust with her audience. She was really good. She was terrifically good at it. And I jokingly said, if she ever tried to, if she ever wanted to switch careers, we could bring her on and have her start doing some selling for us. So that's one instance, I think, where I've mentored somebody, and hopefully to her benefit, hopefully it's something that she thinks is important and has helped her. In terms of me being a mentee, and this is going to sound really drippy, but my mentor is my wife. My wife is an educator by training. She has a master's in education. And over the 26 years, she's not a business person by any, that's not what she does, but she has given me a set of understanding about people, about customer, about others, where I've learned just huge numbers of lessons from her as a mentor, taking me through business concepts. And I guess probably the single biggest one I'll say is that one of the things that she says to me all the time is, when you're a mentor, don't forget that at one point you were a mentee. And as you're teaching, so are you learning. And have an open mind to that you can learn from anyone and learn from, from people you never thought you could. And that has helped me immensely, not only today, this happened today. I was speaking to somebody today who runs a hot dog shop in Portugal. And this person gave me a lesson today. This is someone I've known for 40 years. And she today gave me a lesson in being very happy with what you have versus always wanting more. And it was a great lesson for me. And this is someone who I've worked with over the years to help her run and build her businesses. And today she runs she owns and she's the only hot dog shop in a small town in Portugal, which the name escapes me right now.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, you can learn from everybody. And I'll reflect on the first piece you mentioned about we are all salespeople. Having sales in what we do is important for leading by influence. It's especially hard when back to the value creation discussion, being able to effectively communicate that. So I'm going to reinforce that to listeners, because I think it's something that in this particular field is really, really important to career growth and to success, both working up and down the stack within an organization.
Yeah, and Dan, unfortunately, a lot of people look at a professional seller in a negative light.
Yeah,
there is a negative connotation with that. And a professional seller is a professional problem solver. You make your living solving problems, and I would suggest to you that compliance officers are professional problem solvers. Guardians, sorry, I got to use that. I'm going to take that terminology. They're professional problem solvers, and having the ability to do that in an easy, subtle, persuasive way is powerful, very powerful.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And unfortunately, we're getting to the end of our time already. This went so fast. So Jerry, we always close with asking for some of the best advice you got from a mentor. Now, you may have tipped your hand on one of those advices a little while ago. So maybe we exclude that and say, what's the next best advice you've gotten from a mentor that you want to share with people? I'm just going to take the opportunity to get a couple out of you, because we already got one, at least one.
So the second best advice I've ever gotten from a mentor, and comes from a gentleman. He may no longer be with us. His name is Rich Wilson. Rich Wilson was my first sales manager at a company called LDI in Cleveland, Ohio in 1981. And that was my 82, excuse me. That was my first sales job. And Rich, this was back in the day when you were allowed to smoke cigarettes in an office. And one of the things that Rich did, and I promise I'll be quick, Rich took his cigarettes, and for some reason he broke the filter off the cigarette, turned the cigarette around and put the filter back on, and then smoked the cigarette. That stays with me. I have no idea why. Rich, over a cigarette and his glasses, said to me, patience in work is the most important thing that you will learn as time goes on. If you're impatient, you will probably not succeed. And I have spent the better part of my life running as fast and as hard as I thought I needed to succeed. When I started to slow down, work urgently, but not with panic, I began to experience what he was trying to teach me, which is giving people an opportunity to get whatever it is you're trying to do. You have to be patient and persistent. And he didn't say persistent. I added that one.
Well, I think it's a great corollary and addition and great insights. And I think I can see the applicability of that all through my career. And I wish I had learned something like that earlier, but it's absolutely right on the nose.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And we are very excited that we got the opportunity to speak with you. Join us next week for another episode of our Mentor Core podcast. And Jerry, You've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you both for your time. It's been a lot of fun. I've appreciated it.